Thanks for coming back from your coffees, and hopefully you're appropriately caffeinated after last night. And this morning's really interesting panel with Warren. I've got a great selection of guys, folks this morning. One of the things that you picked up from Warren's Google description is the plethora, the enormous number of apps that are coming down into the stores for both Android and iOS. So I'm just going to lay the table for a minute or two, and then I'm going to turn it over to our able group here. You have about 1 million apps available on the iOS platform and Android. Most people in the room will have somewhere around 40 apps. On average, depending on where you are in the world, it's between 40 and 80 different apps. The market opportunity for advertising through those applications is tremendous. In the U.S., it's about $1 billion, I think, dollars. Globally, it may be 10 times that amount. And what you're seeing, of course, is the adoption rate. If Warren's correct and Google is seeing 1 million smartphone activations a day, you're seeing commensurate amount of downloads of apps to those devices. So we have 3 companies working from right to left here. We have Richard with Flurry. Flurry is one of the leading data houses for applications on smartphones. It is analyzing over 2 terabytes, 1.5 terabytes of data a day, and is venture-backed, raising about 25-30 million US dollars. Next in line is Paul from Tapjoy, one of the early pioneers in in-app advertising, and they have been funding application companies as part of their strategy in rolling out their network, and now have about 700 million mobile users across 200,000 applications, with offices in London as well as San Francisco and elsewhere. And then last, we have David McCarthy from Gree. Gree is a publicly listed company in Japan. I haven't checked recently, but it was worth about $8 billion not that long ago. It too has been acquiring companies over the last months in terms of rolling out its platform beyond Asia into the US and Europe. Most recently, it's done a deal with Moshi Monsters here. You may remember them. They appeared here about 3 years ago. So what I'd like to do is give each of the panelists a couple of minutes to introduce themselves, and then walk through a series of questions that I hope will be of interest to you. I'm going to start with Richard, if you would.
Yeah. So thanks, Matt. Matt's just asked me to just give you some research and stats from Flurry. As he kindly said, we now track 210,000 applications for about 75,000 companies. We're actually more than an analytics company. We're an advertising business. We give away the analytics to drive data that helps publishers monetize their app traffic better through advertising, and for advertisers to acquire better quality users. So I just want to fly through, promise to be quick. Growth of smartphones, we now see, I think it's around 600 active smartphones a month. Flurry tracks pretty much every single one of those. So and we see that's about 25% of the potential penetration of the addressable market. We see there's around 2 billion of us in the world that will be able to afford a smartphone in the coming years. So we're only about 25% of the way through that penetration. So it's quite an exciting moment in history where we think that the market's maturing, but actually we're only just getting started. As Matt said, the number of apps is just getting bigger and bigger. We think dedupe, there's about 850,000 apps in the world that consumers can choose from. And therefore, discoverability quickly becomes, most of the time, the key challenge for us all is we produce what we think are great games, and then how the heck do we actually get them noticed, get them in stores, get them featured, maybe some marketing budget behind that, and that's a real big challenge. The good news is that the freemium model is pretty much established. In-app purchase and advertising are the two principal sources of revenue for those games developers in the audience. Advertising has often been underplayed, so that we see that growing to about 23% of the potential forecast share for this year. We see the revenue from in-app purchase and advertising being about 8.7 billion global this year, and 23% of that being advertising is about 2 billion. So those of you who are developing freemium without advertising are really losing and leaving quite a lot of dollars on the table, a share of around 2 billion forecast for this year alone. The impact on apps and app consumption, Warren from Google also used a similar number. We see that those that have smartphones spend around an hour and a half every day inside applications. That's definitely eroding our web time, either desktop or mobile web. Smartphone and tablet usage changes over time. You can see, therefore, that tablets tend to be better consumed in the evening, longer periods. Smartphones tend to be snacked over a shorter burst, but much more sustained over the day. Penetration and in-app sessions for both games and social. Games are traditionally dominated. Around 24 minutes of the time spent on smartphones has been in games, and now social networking has caught up. So there's kind of like a few slides just to sort of set the scene. There's data around freemium. It's around 90% of the top 25 grossing games are now freemium, taking revenue from in-app purchase and advertising, and around 70% of those are games. So last couple of slides. The good news is that outside the top 100, there is still a lot of revenue to be made. So we see that outside the top 100, now 68% of revenue is generated from those outside the top 100. There's always been a lot of focus on being in the top 100, but we're seeing an increased share of revenue from outside. So that's a good trend. So I will stop there. Thanks a lot.
These slides will be available online. So as quick as I know you were trying to write, you can catch these up later from Richard.
There were about 3 more, but I did promise not to keep it short.
All right. Paul, if you could give a little background about Tapjoy and your experience in the market, that'd be great. Here, I think we're going to actually. Yep.
Hello.
Yep.
Hiya, my name's Paul. I'm from Tapjoy. So Tapjoy was formed in 2010, basically to solve the discovery problem for app developers. We operate a platform that connects app developers who wish to have their app discovered, publishers who have a freemium app that they're willing to serve ads into, and the consumer who is willing to engage with those ads. So an example of how our platform operates is, for example, you might be playing Draw Something, and you get a certain number of colors or word packs available for free. And if you want to unlock one of those, an extra palette of colors, you can either pay with in-app purchases or you can engage with an advertiser in some form. So the engagement might be something like download another application, say, for example, Groupon's app. If you download Groupon's app, Groupon pay an amount of money to have their app discovered, and that funds your account in Draw Something to allow you to then go and unlock whatever color palette that you wanted. So that's the model that we operate, and it's been a very, very successful one. So successful that Apple tried to stop us operating on their platform, which has led to us operating a direct-to-consumer proposition as well, which we have at tapjoy.com. So if you go to tapjoy.com, you can basically earn currency in your favorite apps. We operate on iOS, Android, Windows Phone, and we're quite excited to see what's going to happen with web apps as well going forward.
Great. If you could give a little background, David.
Yep. Hello, I'm David from Gree, and I think more and more people are starting to hear of us now in the West, but Gree was essentially started life in about 2004, I think, as a kind of social network in Japan. Then it moved on to mobile devices, and then shortly after that, they released the first kind of social mobile game, a game called Fishing Star, which had in-app transactions. It was free to play, and that really shifted the company in this direction of being both a social network, but a social network that's driven by games rather than photo sharing or chat or whatever. So now, I mean, there's kind of three main lines of business. Like the first is that we make our own games. We make our games in Japan. We've recently acquired a company called Funzio. We have local studios. So we have a lot of different games. We're aiming to go global. So the point is that we hope to have games that are suitable for every territory. The other thing is that we have an advertising business ourselves. Like we offer advertising on the platform, and then we also kind of host other people's games. So developers can release their game on our network. And we've just kind of launched a global platform. It's still in beta phase, so we're still kind of working on the functionality and stuff. But you can kind of download it now, and if you download it, it functions a little bit like an app, a cross between an app portal and a social network, really. Mm-hmm. But what we offer developers, again, it's interesting that that we were talking about this kind of maybe long tail kind of revenue. It used to be that, but it still is, I guess, that a lot of people are kind of chasing that day one kind of top 10 chart position in order to get discovered. But our platform offers a lot of different discoverability kind of tools and APIs that help you get your game discovered. But more than that, it also kind of, there's a lot of tools in our SDK that help your game appeal to users for longer and monetize in the long term. And so, if you can create a game that has that long-term revenue potential, then it sort of frees you from the tyranny of that kind of day one discoverability. And, clearly it's, these guys' kind of business is advertising, and that's a really important part of getting your game in front of people. But our platform also offers a lot of tools to help drive organic installs, and the quality of organic installs tends to be, very high users. They tend to engage with the game a bit better. So, it's interesting days, and I guess we're all in sort of kind of overlapping businesses, right?
Everyone's bumping into each other. Paul, I wanted to ask you, is there a different game experience because of the ability to move up a level if you do X or if you download Y? Does that change the game-playing nature of it?
Well, I think it changes how, and we've done research on this, it changes how the user thinks about the game, right. Certainly, because, if you're, and there was a good presentation about it yesterday with, there was the guy described it as a curtain that you can't get behind because, you have to pay for it. So if you can engage with advertising and not pay for the premium experience but still get that, then obviously the user feels better about the game for that. And we found that, we did a survey and 23% of users thought better about the game if it had incentivized advertising inside it. So yeah, absolutely. The more ways that you can give for a user to pay, the better they will, and potentially the ones that they don't actually have to spend real money, rather spend with their time, right. The better they will feel about the game.
Right, so they're swapping their the currency or interaction with an ad in order to advance in the game, sometimes speed it up a little bit.
Yeah, so they spend their time rather than their cash.
Right. Now, Richard, one of the slides that you had really focused on the long tail, as you said, that a larger percentage of the games that are popular are not in the top 10, top 100. What about retention? How I think I've read certainly that over 3 months,
yes,
you've got a real decay, so to speak. How do you address that?
So the freemium model, is a fantastic model. If you think about the limitation factors of the traditional console and the portable games market, where consumers couldn't get hold of a game easily and for free and try it, and I think that enables the market significantly, and then to enable a business where you can distribute super quick, you can distribute it for free. I think it allows thousands and thousands of indie developers around the world to have apps installed quickly. Discoverability is the issue, but also we're seeing a much more increasing trend that you don't have to be in the top 100 to generate significant revenue. Although the 100 still is where a lot of the revenue lies. But I think that's an exciting opportunity. I think it's an opportunity for us all to feel that you don't have to do whatever it takes. And we were talking about some of the successes of Gree and Natural Motion, and success does breed success.
But is there a recipe, and I may not be just one or two things, to get above that, to get the virality, that doesn't make you in the top 100, but gets you, the attention? How do you do that?
Wow. Gosh, it's so many different things. I mean, build it and they will come doesn't apply to our market, and so you have to think about how you fix that. Having a significant marketing budget does help, but I think for most indies that is out of reach. Most will then consider a publishing arrangement such as the Gree platform to help and add a sort of a sense of weight and dynamics and cross portfolio. I think that's key. Your relationship with the stores comes with your past reputation. If you don't have one, that makes it that much more difficult. But we all know that the power of getting featured in the stores is significant. We often, in this day and age, focus on Google Play and Android and Windows and forget that the operators and the handset manufacturers still can provide significant distribution opportunities. I think we also saw about, this morning about, a lot of gamers will look at trailers and will look at video. Our video product is very successful in a 15 or 30-second spot in a way that the store just doesn't provide, in showing you what's in the game and how much fun it is and why it might appeal to you in a 30-second high-definition commercial on your tablet. So again, that's another way. And then straightforward PR, pre-releasing on YouTube and Twitter and Facebook and the social platforms. And I've got the rest of the afternoon to answer the same question.
That's good. But I know that Tapjoy, Paul, also has now moved into video. Is in part what Rich is describing, the power of video, what Warren talked about earlier, to give a taste of what the gameplay is? How much of a role is that?
Yeah, I just want to. Well, I'll just go back to the question that Richard was asking as well. I mean, when you become a freemium app developer, you turn yourself into a marketer as well, and either you take that on as yourself, or you give that responsibility to someone else, either a publisher or a marketing firm, to do that for you.
Sure.
So there are a few technical tricks, and I've seen, for example, referral codes work very, very well to get the virality.
Describe what that is, a referral code.
Well, so for example, if you get a friend to put your code in their game as a friend, then they get an amount of currency for doing that, or they get some sort of bonus for doing that.
Right.
And so you'll see gamers put their codes on on the review section of iTunes, or on the forums of games, and that's a really great way of getting virality and getting people to connect for free.
Right.
But more and more, I think you as a game developer, you become a marketer as well, and so you have to do the PR element, you have to do the advertising element, you have to do the YouTube optimization, etc., etc. Sorry.
No, I just wanted to stay with the idea of all the little tips and tricks. Is there, for all three of you, some insight into pairing a game with an advertiser or a particular promotion to boost the relevance or the context?
Well, I mean, that's essentially what we're trying to do, right?
Okay.
We're trying to we're either our advertiser in this example would be a game advertiser,
right,
and we're trying to pair that game with the right person, because the closer the relevance, obviously, the more likely they're going to go and pay and then play at a later date.
Right.
So we're working on algorithms based on the types of games that people play to suggest to them
if you like this, you'll like
exactly
that.
The Amazon model we're working on. And so our direct consumer proposition, tapjoy.com, that's exactly what we're trying to build there, a social relevant app store where people can go and find apps right for them.
Right.
One of the slightly more forced ways that we also can drive an engaged audience is by, rather than saying to a user, just download and open this app to discover content, is basically say to the user, now download the app and get to a certain level. So they experience the game, they get to understand what it's about, and they're much more likely to go on and play that game because
right,
they understand the experience.
Now, David, you come with I think a terrific advantage because of the Gree platform and all the finances that come with being a big Asian powerhouse. When you went out, or when the company went looking for companies that would be appropriate for the platform, what things were Gree looking for in regards to Funzio and others that they're out there?
Well, I mean, actually, like those decisions will be taken by somebody else in the organisation. But
Sure.
again, like a key part of our strategy is to, I mean, a key part of this business is to kind of, for example, if you're releasing a game, release a game and then measure the KPI, measure the metrics, see how people are interacting with it, and then adjust to the market reality. Like so, but everything is a little bit of a test. So I think, for us, we want to kind of cover that whole spectrum of gaming audiences, of gaming styles. We want to make sure that in every territory we have, like we've got games that have been very successful in Japan. We're localizing those for local territories and seeing what happens with those. It might be that those aren't successful. It might be that we have to focus on locally developed games, and that's something else we're focusing on. So, a company like Funzio obviously occupies a certain part within that spectrum of games, within that spectrum of approaches. It's, kind of fairly, I think in the business now we kind of tend to call it like a mid-core. It's gaming that's kind of almost quite traditional gaming content.
Right.
That's aimed at, maybe a less mass market audience than some of our most successful games in Japan. So I think, by assembling that kind of broad spectrum of games and, releasing it in every territory, we can look at what happens in the territory and then kind of react to the KPI. And, like when you're asking questions about engagement, I mean, I love this question of engagement because there's a load of stuff on our platform that helps developers kind of engage their audiences for longer. But, a key part of it is actually getting the design right. And, that's why I always love attending Natural Motions talks because those guys have really got it right. They always nail it. If you want to know about engagement, go to their talks because they'll tell you all about it. But, you almost have to deconstruct why people are playing your game. You have to go right back to basics and understand that the consumer's perception of the game now is very different. They have a very different value model. Like in the old days, people like me who used to play a lot of games would like to pay £40 for a discrete, finite experience. And, that value was, we associated £40 with a certain amount of time or a certain quality of experience. And now people are doing it very differently, right? They're kind of spending money on virtual objects. And, the value associated with that object is entirely different. It might be to display to their friends that they're successful in the game. It might be that they just don't want to waste time kind of waiting for that village to be built and they want to get on with it. It's an entirely different value model. And once you start to understand that, then you can build the kind of engagement into the actual game cycle itself.
Well, one of the things that was in Richard's slides, and I know this is a theme that's starting to really appear, is the large percentage of time spent on the device that's not about gaming, even though that's a big piece of the apps, downloads, but it's really about the social networking. Does, coming from Gree's background, that heritage of really being a social platform, does that give you any kind of insights or advantages?
I think it gives us a little bit of a head start. I think people coming to game development, free-to-play game development from a conventional console background have to slightly relearn the rules, whereas, coming from a social network, like the social elements are built into all of our games, and they're built into the actual game cycle. You have to build them into the fabric of the game design itself so that it doesn't seem intrusive. And also, our platform is a social network, but it's aimed at gaming as well. So it means that our audiences are already kind of expecting that kind of social engagement. It can feel a bit spammy on less game-oriented platforms when you're getting a load of emails from friends about games that you're not interested in and stuff, right? But
I want to come back to Richard. You've got a global perspective that I know Gree is just starting, and Tapjoy certainly is rolling out. From your vantage point, is there a difference between the type of game that's successful in the Asian market versus the North American market versus the European, or is it pretty much the same? Are there different flavors of interactions?
I don't think I know actually. It's certainly to be popular and to get significant penetration, embracing freemium, the big growth in mobile, understanding where the compound annual growths are for certain markets. We produced some data the day that China's growing at an incredible rate, in Brazil and India and Japan. There's 35 million smartphones in China, but a total population of 1.3 billion. Similar population in India with a penetration currently of about 3 million. Okay, the potential is a lot lower in India because of the affordability, which is what I referred to earlier. So I think to make an outstanding successful game, I think you've got to be taking not only the obvious markets like the US, and there is a significant saturation issue in the US. And it's very difficult to penetrate there, especially by category. You launch something with zombie in it, and most consumers, where the like-minded Amazon referral.
Where's Ian? Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Sorry about that. Where the like-minded recommendation, and Flurry does this similar thing with all of our data in terms of recommending apps that's similar to the ones they already have based on the number of apps we track. But it actually can work against you sometimes if you're launching in a new category with a similar or same name. Actually users will think, I already have that, and therefore I don't necessarily want to take on that category. But I don't know whether maybe David had a better or Paul, whether there's specific apps that are thoroughly successful in some continents and not others. I actually don't have that insight. But
Paul, do you have any thoughts?
Well, there are very few truly successful global apps. I mean, you just have to look at the top grossing in the App Store. CSR, top grossing in a lot of the Western countries, but hasn't done as well in. I don't think it's top grossing in Japan, for example. It's not top 10 grossing in Japan. So obviously, it wasn't as attractive to those guys as it is to the Western audience. Right. I think a lot of it is about the art style, and there is definitely a game mechanic part to it as well, which is exactly what GRI are trying to find out now. Exactly what is the difference between the Eastern audiences and the Western
sensibilities.
Ones. Exactly. So I'll pass over to Dave so he can talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's something that I find fascinating. I mean, in Japan, like a large proportion of our games are either this genre called card battle, where the driver of that game is a little bit like the football stickers we used to have as kids, right? Like it's trying to collect all the cards. So, the thing that's driving the usage of those games is that now in Japan, there's, content that appeals to everybody. If you like baseball games, there's a baseball card game. If you like soccer, there's a soccer game. There's even, like an AKB48 kind of girl band, idol band kind of game. So there's a bit for everybody. The other big genre in Japan right now is romance games. Those two genres make up a huge part. And then the other part, I guess, is city building. In the West, obviously, city building games are much higher. Maybe like casual games have historically been a little bit more popular. But I think we are starting to see a little bit more overlap now. I mean, DNA's kind of card battle game, Rage of Bahamut, is very successful in the West. And again, that's because they've allied this card battle game cycle, with the kind of content that appeals to, a key gaming demographic in the West, which is that kind of World of Warcraft audience, right? And I think as you start to see the gaming audience in the West kind of develop, I think you will start to see a little bit more overlap. But yeah, clearly there is going to have to be locally developed games as well, like for local tastes. And, people perceive value slightly differently in different regions. But again, part of that is a function of the time and growth of the market as well, I think.
Good. I think this is a good overview and a nice place to stop. Are there questions out there about mobile games and the platforms themselves in terms of reach and appeal? Yes, we have one up here.
I'll just be the mouthy guy today. Can you think of any good examples that you really enjoy that go through every culture and be really popular throughout every culture on the planet?
You mean games that are successful? I mean, well, I guess if you look at the top grossing store, I guess Rage of Bahamut is at the top of all of them. I think Dragon Veil does all right in Japan. But yeah, I think there's at the moment there's not a huge overlap, I don't think. But
oh, it's still early days.
Yeah.
I don't. Well, you look at what Capcom have done, right? They're a Japanese company, and they have lots and lots of games specifically for Japan, but they have a completely different unit for the West, right? So they're building completely different games for the Western audience, and I think increasingly we'll see that. I'm not sure how much overlap there's going to be. I think
Smurf Village was successful globally.
Right, Smurfville, yeah.
Okay, well, yeah, I mean, I don't know whether there's going to be tons and tons of overlap. Right. I think the cultures are quite different, and therefore the games will need to be built for those cultures.
Right. So if you're a Lego or a Smurf, you might have a leg up. Bad pun. Yeah, sorry.
There's
David.
also some cultural. I was with Gameloft and Ubisoft in the last couple of weeks, and there's some cultural loyalty, and it's particularly around like the French market, where anything that Gameloft produces or Ubisoft produces, they tend to absorb and can't get enough of. And the danger is that they test it in the French market, and it looks like it's a raging success, and then they try and sort of replicate that magic in other markets, and it falls flat on its face. That's not to say that GT Racing, Oregon Trail, or Six Guns, or Monster Burner are not any good in the other markets. They are, but tends to be, there's particular examples around that, and it might be the same in Germany. And I suspect Big Point and Wooga are going to be super successful in mobile migration as they accelerate their mobile platform because they're German based. So there are those cultural nuances which you kind of don't think about, but then they're obvious in another respect. Most French people drive French cars. Most French people want to play French games. If it's localized as well, then that always helps.
David.
Hi, it's actually Sean.
Sean.
With just on this East and Western games point, there's a sort of content dynamic in some of the Eastern games where you're not quite sure how much content you're buying for your money, so you're effectively gambling. It's particularly true of some of the card games you were talking about earlier. I wonder how you saw that translating into the Western market.
Well, actually, I think that's. It's not that so much that you don't know how much content is available in the game. It's that the game is always being updated, and actually, that's one of the key tools of engagement is to constantly provide new content. I mean, the users who really engage with these games want more content. Like, they want to buy more stuff. Like, when they've collected all one set of cards, they want a new set of cards, right? So, that's a key part of it. I don't think that's a disadvantage. I don't think it's morally or ethically wrong either to be, to kind of feed people's desire in one sense. And I think that's something that will start to happen in the West as well. Like, I mean, Dragon Veil's just done it as well. Like, they, a very clever kind of marketing campaign. They've just added a new feature to their game where, there's a new feature unlocked in the game where you can race dragons, but you have to be level 15. So that's something that both inspires new users to try and reach level 15, but it also re-engages older players who might have kind of got to level 15 and found the game a little bit boring and kind of disengaged with it. But now there's new content in the game, they can go back and play it. Like, that's how these games work. So I think, increasingly, it's something that is kind of very. There are games that we update by the hour in Japan in terms of updating new content, and I think as this market matures in the West as well, people will be providing a lot more content updates like that.
I think there's another way of looking at it, which is around age and gender, and rather than necessarily, continental differences. And we see very, very big differences in gameplay, time spent, and willingness to pay, the critical component in the freemium model. And we classify the Generation Y audience as typically currently under around 30, 32, very willing to play and play an awful lot. Incentivized advertising rewards that process and engages them and deepens that time spent. And you're prepared to put in a lot of time and grinding away to earn the currency. Whereas actually the older we all get, the more likely we are to start paying for stuff and quickly jumping levels through an in-app purchase. So the younger audience is prepared to play, the older audience is prepared to pay. So thinking about that and your age and gender that you're targeting your games at is critical, as you think about how you're going to monetize those going forward. So another way of looking at the dynamic of who you're building for, which category, which markets, which age and gender audiences do you. And Flurry provides you data around age and gender, and we just launched personas last week. It's 20 different personas based on time spent in apps. The index is at 30 plus the average over the last 30 days. And they're very media-friendly personas like business travelers and casual gamers and parents and mums and sports fans. And you actually get to see another way that we're describing your audiences as they use your games. Helps you again in the next design and the next release. Actually, we built a game we thought was really popular for teenage girls. Turns out the 40-year-old blokes really like it. Maybe that's a weird example. Maybe it's
There's some correlation there.
Personal. I don't play Stardoll, I promise. So I think there are other ways of looking at the consideration and planning process of who am I building for, which markets, what age group, and what are the KPIs. Again, I think David mentioned around how many users do I want to generate? What is that session length, and what does that look like? What is the retention rates? Matt mentioned around the retention rates, and they are bloody awful, I'm afraid. After 30 days, it's 75%. After 12 months, it's 96%. On average, audience is lost. Obviously, some do incredibly well and some retain better. But in the freemium world, it's all about retention.
Yeah, and one of the things that I think, all three offer terrific platforms in terms of raising awareness of games, but I'm also getting a message of the swiftness. You just mentioned, Richard, that the life cycle of games is just telescoped down so swiftly, in part because there's so much competition, but that's to David's point about having to constant refresh in order to retain, because once I've got you, great, but now I have to constantly be feeding you new information.
Yeah, and I guess that's, in the world of I talked about how people use smartphones and that very frequent snacking, and the gameplay time is very short, and instant gratification and rewarding people in the first 30 seconds is critical. There is this phenomena that app developers are very busy creating one-night stands with almost everyone. And actually, the incentivized model, it maybe isn't sustainable long term. It helps discoverability because you can buy a ton of downloads that get you into the store instantly. As soon as you stop buying them, you come straight back out again. But actually, by default, you're buying traffic from users that have downloaded your game for another reason. So actually working with networks and where we think our data makes a difference is helping you through that relevance, find more likely people that are not only going to download you, but to play you and play you for longer. So the type of audiences you're buying through marketing is a critical. So if you're burst for rank solving, fair enough, and there's lots of tools, and we on the stage provide some of those. But actually, if you buy for sustained engagement, critical to the freemium model, then you have to think about it slightly more scientifically. And there are new marketing tools out there that will help you measure the relative value by source of traffic. Flurry has launched ad analytics. There are others out there like ADX and has offers that enables you to say, okay, I'm going to buy some traffic from various ad networks and various publishers, including Gree, and what is the relative value and quality of those audiences? So again, very new tools for a very new market that help you put some science back into what was previously a scattergun buy and hope that you're buying the right type of audiences, and only see afterwards, maybe through analytics, where you've got engagement and where you've not. So there are some very helpful tools that are being launched this year.
I have a question in the back there. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Fiona. I'd like to pick up on the issue of timescale and so on. You mentioned how fast the games is moving. I'm interested in the top 100 apps. I mean, okay, it's really encouraging to hear today that there are better opportunities if you're outside that framework. But nonetheless, the top 100 is where everybody wants to be. And I'm fascinated to know, does anybody know what sort of rate of churn is? How long typically could you be in the top 100 apps?
I mean, it's almost
and
impossible.
Has that changed?
It's almost impossible to give you an answer because it really varies by game, by region. I mean, something like Fishing Star, the game that I mentioned, that we brought out, I think, in 2007, that's been converted to a smartphone app now. I mean, it's still in Japan, it's still inside the top grossing, right? I mean, that's 5 years. Other games might drop out very quickly. And, so it really, really depends on the game. Some games have a very long life cycle. Some games are designed for that.
Yeah, I mean, Angry Birds would be there for a long time. I can see that. But I'm interested in is that actually also speeding up?
So I think there's a good quote that I can't remember who said it, but the top 3 is vanity, but the top grossing is sanity. So everyone asks us, we want to get into the top 10 of the top 3 apps, but to be honest, that's not really what you want to do, because what you really want to do is get quality users who spend money in your game. So if you look at the top grossing, there are some apps that have, there's one in the top 10 who has 1 million DAUs, and there's one that has 250,000 DAUs, and the one with 250,000 DAUs is higher in the top grossing. So you don't need more. You don't need tons and tons of users. You just need users who are the right users for your game, who are going to pay.
Right, excellent point. And then one of the things that I think is really a big takeaway: stop chasing the top 10, the leaderboard, and focus on whom is playing. Right? Yeah.
With 1 million apps, and we're focusing on the top 10. But there are some subtle differences between the iTunes App Store and Google Play. I don't know whether they're widely understood, but I mean, even if you do want to be in the top 3, and I agree with Paul, it's more about grossing than being in the free. But if you do, on iTunes and App Store, it is still pretty much a linear relationship between the number of stores you get and your rank. Although Apple is trying to complicate that and to make it more difficult to predict, but it is still pretty predictable. In the top 10 in the US, I think you have to really generate around 100,000 installs a day, and each day thereafter about 20% more to stay there. So those apps that are in the top app stores are generally generating that volume. On Google Play, it is as very Google-esque, much more black box and less about installs and then Apple, I think, has changed some of its algorithms. It seems to have some rewards for those that have been in the App Store longer, and maybe those that have appeared in the store then get a certain volume of organic downloads and then start to be shifted almost manually down. It can't possibly be with the dynamic of the ecosystem, but it looks almost like that. So it's almost like a regressional algorithm to try and spread the love, I guess, and have more apps. And the App Store in the top 100 being more dynamic, rather than it being a very static list of very popular apps, which soon loses interest.
Oh, there's someone's app going. We have one more question, and I think we're going to have to wrap up. Yep.
I found a microphone in front of me, so I thought I'd ask a question.
Well done.
I wanted to ask us, I'm worried about this localism, and my question is really based on your views on what some academics and other sort of cultural commentators sort of talk about the universality of cultural content. Let me explain the question in case I'm being too opinionated and idiotic. Books translate into hundreds of languages. Movies are successful across the globe. Music touches people's hearts all over the world. And even in games, we've got sort of lots of examples of things which really permeate across the globe. I'm thinking of Toshio Iwai's Electroplankton, which was pretty much a universally loved endeavor. And so what I wanted to ask is do you guys think that there's anything, is it to do with discoverability or is it to do with content? And is the sort of localism and targeting and kind of market-driven application development, is that encouraging us all to be rather more focused on a lack of cultural universality and something which is kind of maybe a little bit on the trivial side, he says, riskily in an audience like this, in terms of our developments of these, what we hope to be cultural products? I'll shut up now.
So there is a global. From a content perspective, there will always be things that are popular globally, but we're talking about the depth of content here. We're talking about 1 million different pieces of content. So you're talking about the icing on the cake that basically is popular globally. But when you've got 1 million pieces of content that you want to take to a global scale, that's a much more difficult proposition to do. So personally, I don't think it's a discovery problem. I think it is the content problem. I do believe that there are some, and there'll be different cases to why things are popular globally. But absolutely, I think, for example, art styles or gameplay types for, the car battle. There's an education that needs to happen with the car battle genre over in the West before we even understand what it is. So until that happens, those games aren't going to be globally successful.
Really? Top Trumps was amazingly successful.
Yeah, but it's not really.
Okay.
Ask my son who's 17 about Top Trumps, and he'll look at me blankly, I think.
Right. Well, listen, I want to thank you all and thank the panelists. Appreciate it very much. Terrific. Thank you.